By 1914, the eve of World War I, only two areas of Africa were not controlled by the major European powers. One country was on the west coast, Liberia in the dark blue, that had been formed by ex-slaves from the United States. On the eastern part of Africa is the country of Ethiopia, a Christian country. All the other areas of Africa had been taken by the European countries. David Livingstone, a Scottish medical missionary, spurred British interest in the continent by navigating the Zambezi River from the Indian Ocean to the interior between 1852 to 1856. The southern part of what we see Mozambique, that is the Zambezi River. In 1866, Livingstone returned to Africa to seek the source of the Nile River. He explored the interior and lost contact with the outside world for 6 years. The New York Herald hired Henry Stanley, a Welsh-born American journalist, to find Livingstone. This was a case of jingoism and national pride. On November 10, 1871, Stanley found Livingstone near Lake Tanganyika and made the infamous statement, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume." In 1876, Leopold II of Belgium hired Stanley to navigate the Congo River and later claimed the Congo for Belgium. This sparked the race for European colonization of Africa, and jingoism prevailed for national prestige to advance Western civilization and Christianity. In the heart of Africa, you see the Belgian Congo. Belgium, a tiny country to the north of France, might have been a small speck within the Congo. The Congo was probably 50 times the size of Belgium. So they started this so-called Scramble for Africa, that if a small, tiny country in Europe could control this, then the doors are open for the rest of the Europeans. In Egypt, a French company with British, French, and Egyptian stockholders completed the Suez Canal in 1869. The Suez Canal links the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea and makes for a shorter travel distance between Great Britain and India. The King of Egypt borrowed heavily in the 1860s because Southern Americans were in the Civil War and cotton was off the market to the British. Egypt expanded cotton production. However, following the end of the Civil War, American cotton flooded the market and the Egyptians could not pay their debt. Instead, the Egyptians sold their stock in the Suez Canal to the British. In 1882, Egyptian soldiers rebelled and the British sent warships to the port city of Alexandria and landed troops. Britain became Egypt's protector. The Egyptians had control of the Sudan to the south, but an Islamic fundamentalist, the Mahdi, overthrew the government. The British and Egyptians' attempt to destroy the Mahdi failed until General Herbert Kitchener sent a massive force in 1898. Modern machine guns were no match for the Mahdi's primitive force. Over 11,000 Sudanese were killed, while only 28 Britons. While in the Sudan, Kitchener prevented France from gaining control of an east-west axis along sub-Saharan Africa. This was known as the Fashoda crisis. France turned around rather than engaging a superior British force. Additionally, the French knew their real threat was Germany, not Great Britain. Notice Egypt in the north, they had control of the Nile River. They also had control of the Sudan. So when Great Britain gains control of Egypt, they gain control of Sudan. The Mahdi was based around Khartoum, and Kitchener's forces sailed down the Nile to annihilate the Mahdi. When he gets further south, the French are moving from French West Africa. They would like an east-west route, whereas the British wanted to control the Nile River because the Nile is everything to Egypt. The Fashoda crisis is very important because the French backed down. They did this because they realized that for the future, their main problem is with Germany, not with Great Britain anymore. They learned that lesson from the Franco-Prussian War. Thus, the French backed down at Fashoda, and this was a change in alliance systems for Europe. In South Africa, originally the Dutch had settled around Cape Town, the city at the southern tip of Africa. These Dutch became known as Afrikaners or Boers. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British gained Cape Town as a colony, and the Afrikaners moved into the interior, pushing African tribes north. The Boers found gold and diamonds in the area, and as the British moved more people into this area, frictions increased and would lead to the Boer War from 1899 to 1902. The war was costly to the British, but the Boers were forced to surrender, although they did remain a major political force in the new Union of South Africa. Notice the Union of South Africa. You would also have Cecil Rhodes, who was a former colonial master of the British in South Africa, also a magnate for forming the De Beers Company, which was a famous gold company inside South Africa. He would push further north, and he had dreamt of a Cape Town to Cairo railroad, so a north-south access. Now notice that Great Britain does not control all those countries. Right in between, in the middle, is Germany, East Africa. So Germany had controlled that point. So Rhodes would get further north into Rhodesia, but the British would never have a railroad that connects Cape Town to Egypt. Even today, well over 100 years later, there still is not a lot of internal development inside Africa. So this was Cecil Rhodes, again, wanting to build this Cape Town to Cairo railroad. However, one of the countries would be named after Rhodes. It is today's Zimbabwe. Germany would gain Southwest Africa, which is Namibia, also Tanzania, which was the German East Africa, Cameroon and Togo, and Portugal also had Angola and Mozambique. So again, many of these European countries took parts of Africa.